She was rejected on a Christmas blind date until a little girl asked, "Can you be my new mom?" Nora Hale felt that line like a punch and a sugar rush all at once. One minute she was sitting under a tiny candle at a corner table, pretending the restaurant chatter was a cozy soundtrack. The next minute some guy slid his chair back like he'd been dragged there and said, deadpan, "You smell like you work with dogs." He didn't mean it as a compliment. He didn't mean anything, really, except to make an exit, and he did it with the kind of casual cruelty that comes easy to people who've never had to explain why a stray matters. Nora let him go. She folded her napkin, paid, and stepped into the street where the city smelled like wet pine and old holidays. Her cheeks were hot, not from the cold, and for a second, she considered calling it quits on kindness altogether. She'd volunteered at the neighborhood animal shelter since college, and yeah, sometimes people poked fun. But she also knew those pups were the softest medicine for a bad night. So she walked to the shelter because that's what she did when the world felt small. She walked toward work that mattered. The shelter was a circus of good intentions. Kids with wool hats, volunteers with mismatched mittens, an old gentleman knitting sweaters for a dozen small dog bodies. Someone had strung silver tinsel around the donation bin. A golden retriever had already claimed the staff room chair as his throne. Nora ducked in, tied on her volunteer badge, and dove into the chaos like a lifeguard diving for a swimmer. She calmed a puppy who was convinced the tree lights were flying fairies. She coaxed a skittish cat out from under a folding table with a tuna bribe and a ridiculous high-pitched voice she only used for animals. That's when she felt the small, cold hand grab the sleeve of her jacket. "Can you be my new mom?" the little girl asked, like it was the most straightforward thing in the world. Nora knelt so she was eye-level with tiny boots dusted in snow. The girl's hair was a tumble of curls, and her eyes were the sort of steady curiosity that belonged to kids who notice everything. For a beat, Nora thought it was a joke, a sugar-high request, but the kid, Tilly, the volunteers whispered, was serious as mittens. She'd seen Nora kneel with the old dog earlier and had decided, in the direct logic only children use, that anyone who fixed sad things must be very good at fixing people too. The little girl's dad, Owen Reyes, came hurrying over with that particular kind of exhausted fluster only parents know. He was a vet who volunteered at the shelter between shifts at his clinic. He apologized like a man who already felt guilty for his daughter's loose habit of recruiting strangers into her tribe. "Tilly, baby, no, sweetheart. We talked about asking people first," he stammered, cheeks pink in the cold. He was handsome in a very clean, tired way. Work-worn hands, a jacket that had seen better winters, and the kind of soft jaw that looked like it probably made scary decisions calmly. Nora laughed softly. Not the bitter kind she'd felt earlier, but a surprised, warm sound. "I'm Nora," she said. "I don't have a degree in mom, but I make a mean grilled cheese, and I volunteer here a lot." Tilly's grip tightened on Nora's sleeve like a small, affectionate anchor. Owen's shoulders eased a notch when he realized she wasn't offended. Then he offered the kind of embarrassed smile that says, loud and messy, "I did not plan this, but I am so glad it happened." They traded the tiny, honest flurries of people getting to know you, what they did, where they're from, the silly thing about a dog who stole someone's mitten every year. And while he talked about clinic hours and she talked about late-night shift relief at the shelter, snowlights blinked outside and a volunteer announced a hiccup at the furnace. The old heating system coughed and died, and kids started to squawk because the puppies' noses got cold. Nora and Owen looked at each other like two people whose story had just been rearranged. The shelter needed hands, and neither was going to walk away. Hands on a toolbox and a policy manual later, they fixed the heaters together, passing wrenches and bad jokes. And for the first time that night, Nora noticed how easy it was to stand beside him. No pretense, no second-guessing, just a shared, quiet competence. By the time the lights blinked steady again, Tilly had announced to anyone within earshot that Nora was officially on our team. And Nora realized she hadn't been this seen, truly seen, since before she learned to keep herself small so other people could feel big. As they walked under the shelter string lights toward the little adoption yard, Tilly's mitten slipped into Nora's hand like a secret, and Nora felt the pull of something soft and very dangerous, a life that could be warm, ordinary, and utterly hers if she'd let it. She didn't expect the next morning to start with her name echoing across the shelter like someone had just won a prize. Nora! Followed by Tilly in rainbow boots sprinting straight into her coat. The kid hugged her like they'd been family for years, not 24 hours, and right behind her came Owen, hair messy from a night shift, and holding 2 coffees he offered with that shy little half smile that made Nora's stomach do a whole gymnastics routine. "I owe you one," he said, handing her the cup. "Actually, I owe you like 12. Nora laughed, but she saw something else in his eyes. Guilt, worry, maybe both. She soon learned why. When things calmed down, Owen asked if they could step outside near the fenced puppy yard. He looked at the ground first, boots scraping snow, then finally said, "Tilly's mom left when she was 2. No note, no fight, just gone." His voice wasn't dramatic or self-pitying. It was the quiet version people use when they've said the same truth enough times to sand the edges off it. Tilly sees kindness, and she grabs it with both hands because she doesn't want to lose more people, he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't want her getting attached and then—" He paused, swallowing, then watching someone walk away again. Nora felt that. Deep. Because she knew that feeling of losing people without explanation. She looked him dead in the eye and said softly, "I grew up in foster care, Owen. People left all the time, so I know what it does to you. And I don't play with hearts. Not hers, not yours." It was the first time she'd said that out loud in years, and Owen's expression shifted. Not pity, just understanding, respect, something warm, something she hadn't let herself hope for. Inside, the shelter kids were decorating pet stockings, so Nora helped Tilly glue pom-poms to a tiny red sock with a glittery puppy claws sticker. Owen watched from the doorway with this soft, stunned look, like he still couldn't believe how naturally Nora fit into the picture. But good moments always have a way of testing themselves. Later, when Nora went to refill treat bags, she overheard a volunteer whisper, "She's trying too hard to be Tilly's replacement mom." It wasn't meant to be cruel, it was just careless, the kind of comment that sticks to your ribs no matter how tough you act. Nora froze. Her chest tightened. Being too much, or not enough, had followed her around her whole life. So she pulled back, gave Owen a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes, and said she had errands. Tilly's face fell when Nora waved goodbye with a practiced little gesture, the same one people used on Nora when she was a kid. "I'll see you later, but never, I promise." That night, Tilly drew something in the craft room, a lopsided Christmas ornament shaped like a dog paw, painted crooked pink with glitter smudges and a tiny tag that read, "Nora plus Tilly equals team." She hung it on the giant shelter tree, whispering, "She'll come back. She has to." Owen found the ornament after closing, held it in both hands, and felt something inside him crack wide open. Maybe he'd let fear guide him too much. Maybe he'd let the past decide the future. So he grabbed his coat, shoved his keys in his pocket, and ran into the snow to find the one woman who had shown up without being asked, and walked away only because she thought she wasn't wanted. Nora was sitting in the back room with an old beagle named Captain, the shelter quiet except for his soft snores and the faint hum of the Christmas lights. She hadn't meant to hide there. She just wasn't ready for her heart to take another hit. Not after last night's rejection, not after hearing the one thing she was terrified of, being too much. When she heard boots crunching behind her, she wiped her eyes fast, pretending she was checking Captain's collar. Owen stepped into the doorway, snow still melting on his shoulders, breath visible in the cold air. "I looked everywhere for you," he said, voice low but steady. "Tilly's been checking the door every 5 minutes." Nora opened her mouth to give an easy excuse, something polite, distant, but Owen held up the ornament gently. The paw print shimmered under the string lights, the messy paint strokes impossibly sweet. "She made this for you," he said. "And he exhaled, long and shaky. "I messed up. I got scared. I keep waiting for people to disappear, but you didn't disappear. You just gave us space because you care." He stepped closer, not rushing, not demanding, just offering his truth, the way someone offers a warm drink on a freezing night. "You're not replacing anyone, Nora. You're becoming someone. For her. For me." Captain snored louder, like he was chiming in. Nora let out a broken laugh and finally looked up at Owen, her eyes glassy and soft. "I didn't want to assume you'd want me around," she whispered. "I didn't want to take up space that wasn't mine." Owen shook his head slowly. "Then let me make it clear. There's space for you. There's room for you. We want you here." He didn't say it like a movie line. He said it like a promise he'd spent years afraid to make. Tilly came bounding in at that exact moment, wearing mismatched boots and a superhero cape she'd crafted from a dog blanket. She launched at Nora like a rocket made of pure joy. "Are you staying now? Daddy said you might stay." Nora knelt, her arms curling around that tiny, hopeful body, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she had to brace for disappointment. She brushed Tilly's curls back and whispered, "If your dad thinks it's okay, then yeah, I'd really like to stay." Owen let out a breath that sounded like relief and hope tangled together, and he stepped closer, resting a warm hand on Nora's shoulder. "It's more than okay," he murmured. Snow drifted past the windows like confetti, soft and slow and almost magical. The shelter glowed with twinkle lights, the paw print ornament shining on the tree like a tiny beacon for second chances. As the three of them leaned into each other, Nora, Owen, and the little girl who started it all, the room felt like a home stitched together by kindness, courage, and the kind of love that comes only when no one is trying to pretend. And if you looked close, right there under those blinking Christmas lights, you could see exactly what they had become. A family made not by blood, but by choice. And a little girl brave enough to ask for the mom her heart already knew. Thank you for listening to this heartwarming story. If Nora, Owen, and little Tilly made you smile, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories filled with kindness, love, and second chances. Your support helps us bring more warm moments to you. Thanks for being here.